Coming up,
Making waves.
North Korea launches.
Dragon returns.
Okay, go.
And we're going to be talking about the commercial Orbital Transportation Services 10 years later. Stay tuned. Tomorrow begins right now. And welcome to Tomorrow, episode 9.05 for Saturday, February 13th, 2016. My name is Benjamin Higginbotham. We'll be joined by Jared, Carrie-Ann, and Mike in just a moment. But before we get to that, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who've helped to make this specific segment to this episode happen. These are the people who've contributed $10 or more to this specific episode. To find out more information, I just realized that I neglected to put the bug has the new hashtag on it, and it just barely doesn't quite clear the bottom part of that graphic. I'll have to fix that for next week. For more information on how you can become a patron of Tomorrow, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. We are hashtagging our show now. This show is hashtag COTS10, which will make a little bit more sense when we get into our main topic. Now, before we do that, Jared, let's talk about you look like an excited school kid. You are bouncing all over the place. What? God.
Well, if you have been living under a rock, let me tell you about this. On Thursday, we finally announced that we have detected gravitational waves. We have directly detected those. And we are so excited about that. A lot of people were saying that this is the scientific discovery of a lifetime, but I say it's a scientific discovery of lifetimes because we've been attempting to pull gravitational waves out for almost 100 years now because they were predicted with Einstein's general theory of relativity in 1915. And gravitational waves are a result from the curvature of space-time in special situations, like when objects with large amounts of mass are orbiting each other, say two neutron stars or two black holes. And Einstein very humorously said that although he predicted them, that we would never have the technology to actually detect them. So last year, the laser interferometer, here we go, as I show off.
Take two.
Yeah, take two. Last year, the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, also known as LIGO, was updated so that it would be much more sensitive than it was initially, and it started an engineering run in February of 2015.
And you actually talked about that.
I did. Yeah, I talked about it in a space pod in November. So
and I think you also talked about it on the live show as well, if I remember right. So
Yeah.
you've talked about this a bit, and we've upgraded it, and now it's detected gravitational waves.
Yes, it was actually in the middle of its engineering run. So they ran it. So they ran it for about 7 months just to make sure that all the equipment was working correctly. And 4 days before they actually began the scientific run on September 18th, they detected a gravitational wave, and it was detected on September 14th of 2015 at 9:50 and 45 seconds UTC. Now, there's actually two LIGO sites. There's one in Louisiana and one in Washington, and they both detected the gravitational wave 7 milliseconds apart from each other, which is the expected speed that you would find a gravitational wave moving at between those two. So there's one thing that helped determine that it was that way. So within days, the team worked to determine whether it was a real gravitational wave or not, because a cool thing about LIGO is in order to keep themselves sharp and making sure that they're actually making good discoveries, occasionally they will actually inject a fake gravitational wave into their systems to see if they can catch it and tell the difference between the two. They cleared it that it wasn't a fake, and lo and behold, we've detected gravitational waves. And we actually have a video that gives you the sound, if you will, of what it sounded like. And this is it.
Sounds like an ultrasound.
Yeah, a little bit. So basically what you are hearing there is you are hearing the gravitational data turned into something auditory that we can comprehend. But that is the gravitational data of two black holes emerging 1.3 billion light years away from us. One of those black holes had 29 times the mass of the sun, the other had 36 times, and they both collided at a closing rate of about 50% of the speed of light. Now, when they collided, this released about 50 times the amount of energy of all the stars in the universe for a very brief amount of time. So, an extremely energetic event there. And when the wave reached us, it was about 1,000th the diameter of a proton in size. So to give you an idea of how big that is, if you take a meter, that is 1 times 10 to the negative 18th meters in size.
That doesn't give me any idea as to how large that is, Jared.
I can't even.
I have no context with that whatsoever. I can't comprehend how small that is.
1,000th.
How many football fields is it?
Oh man, that is 1,000th the diameter of a subatomic particle, and that's how we detected it. So
wow, I mean that's.
And this is a big one too. This is about as big as gravitational waves get in terms of size. So now LIGO, now that they know what they need to look for, they are very confident that they will find anywhere from 3 to 90 gravitational waves during the next science run.
So who cares?
Well,
not to be blunt, but I mean, what? So yeah, we found them, we predicted them. Einstein predicted them.
Yes.
So we've proven the prediction. So what? What does that mean?
Well, this is important to understanding the fundamental nature of the universe. If we really want to understand physics and how physics itself, as physics is, works, gravitational waves are very important to that. And it could lead to new breakthroughs in physics. Also, it's another proof for the theory of general relativity, which so far, every time we've tested the theory of general relativity, it's passed the test, which is absurd for a scientific something you come up with, because most of the time you have to revise it a little bit, but so far we haven't had to, because it's literally passed everything with flying colors. It also allows us to add another point to the existence of black holes being real things. And in addition to that, we now have an entirely new type of astronomy called gravitational astronomy, where we can actually use these gravitational waves to figure out things astronomically.
That last comment confuses me. Is there debate that black holes exist?
There is no more debate that black holes don't exist, if you will, because we know the effects, we can see the effects of black holes, but we're very excited about gravitational waves because that is something, if you will, direct from an action that a black hole is performing, or in this case, 2 black holes are performing. So this is sort of irrefutable evidence, if you will, that black holes really do exist. You
are just bouncing off the ceiling.
This is amazing.
Excited.
This is just like we have a whole new type of astronomy that's going to come out of this.
That's pretty cool.
It's just awesome.
So
All right.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Before we move on, with these gravitational waves, is this something extremely sensitive, and that's why it was so hard to detect, or could these gravitational waves actually be pushing and pulling other very large astronomical objects out there?
Well, it is basically affecting the fabric of the universe, space-time itself. So as the wave goes through, it does essentially move whatever is there on its way through, but they're so small that you don't notice it unless you have the utmost sensitive equipment, and that's what's happening with LIGO and the discovery that was made. We've been looking for gravitational waves directly since the 1970s, so this has been something that's been a very long time in the making, and we're just ecstatic that we finally have the result that says, yes, they're real.
Well, you say they're small, but they're small by the time they make it here. They'd be larger relative to the distance from the originating wave, right? So if you were right next to these 2 black holes that are colliding, that would suck.
Yes.
But I assume the wave would be much more influential at that point. You'd have a much stronger pull. Just like, we're far enough away from Jupiter where it doesn't have a whole lot of pull on Earth. But you get next to Jupiter, that would suck because the gravitational pull of Jupiter would just pull you right in.
Exactly. Yeah. It's all relative to the distance you are from whatever is causing the gravitational wave. And in this case, 1.3 billion light years, that's a bit of distance. So they're not sure if they're going to find any relatively time soon because they have to get the science run started again at LIGO. But like I said, as soon as they run again, they're expecting to just end up getting flooded with them. And we're so excited to see what the future is going to bring with this.
All right.
Cool.
Let's move on to some space launches. First up, we have a Soyuz launch with a GPS satellite, Glonass M. I realize this is probably just a GoPro sitting near the Soyuz, but it is
beautiful, though.
It is still one of my favorite shots of the Soyuz lifting. That is just gorgeous. That happened Sunday, February 7th, 2016, at 21 minutes after midnight Coordinated Universal Time from a Plastic Cosmodrome. That was a Soyuz 21B rocket. Like I said, it was lofting the Glonass M satellite constellation. That's part of Russia's GPS system, their global positioning system. It actually requires 24 operational satellites. They were down to 23 operational satellites, so that one brings them back up to 24. That's actually designating number 51 in their system. So they've had a few birds kind of come in and out of service. It was 1,415 kilograms, which for those of you in the United States is 3,119 pounds. All right, moving right around. Here's a launch from North Korea. That one is a little bit unexpected, unless you were, of course, looking at Launch Library. I believe they had it up in the Launch Library.
You did?
That was the Kwangyong Sim satellite, which is Korean for Bright Star 4, on the Unha Rocket, which is Korean for Galaxy. So it's a Galaxy rocket. Now, the Galaxy rocket has actually launched 4 times. This is the 4th time that it's launched since 2009, and it is the second successful launch of those 4. That launch happened Saturday, February 7th at 30 minutes after midnight Coordinated Universal Time from the Sohae Space Center in North Korea. Yeah, it's got a little bit, well, in all fairness, we're about to go through stage sep here, so if you give it just a minute, you'll see the stage burnout, and then you'll see kind of what appears to be stage sep. Okay, it takes an extra second here. We actually had to eliminate all of their, they had very patriotic music. It was very patriotic.
Yeah, we don't want to hit the copyright on that.
Didn't want to hit the copyright.
There
So
we
to
go.
eliminate all of that, so, and now you can actually see it starting to go through its separation. This launched into a sun-synchronous orbit. It's likely designated for Earth observation. It was initially thought that the satellite was actually tumbling and out of control. However, now it's been reported that it actually seems to be stabilized and actually brought into control. They've got a really great shot on board, and I thought it wasn't this long into the video. I'm hoping that it comes up any moment.
Oh, there was one initially.
No,
Almost
it's like
initially.
it's on board. It shows kind of the
inner stage?
Yeah, the inner
Yeah.
stage. It's we may just miss it. I might just have to tell you to hit up the North Korean website and well, if you search for, actually kudos to them because they posted this on YouTube.
Yeah, they did.
Absolutely. So you've got certain entities who won't post any of this stuff, and they're like, no, here you go.
Yeah.
It was way easier to find the North Korea launch footage than the Chinese launch footage.
Yeah,
So.
or
And
Blue
much
Origin.
longer too, or Blue Origin. Blue Origin and China are the 2 hardest. There you go. Look,
wow.
Isn't that cool?
And
Isn't that great?
I like the corrosion of the interstate.
Boom! There you go.
I can't tell if that's the 2nd or 3rd stage there.
I couldn't tell.
Something
either.
Something I find really interesting about this rocket is North Korea, also like Iran, have all these economic sanctions against them, and so they've kind of had to work with what they can to do this. And something I find interesting about this rocket, that particular one is designated Unha 3, and its first stage is 4 Scud missiles with a bunch of different upgrades added to it. Its second stage is also based on a Scud missile, and then its third stage is actually based on the upper stage of the Saphir rocket that Iran has, their upper stage rocket. And that's how kind of both countries were able to get around having something that is space capable. And something else really interesting about this rocket is it's the way that it's thrust and its power for all of its different engines, in especially the first 2 stages were designed, it's not powerful enough to be an ICBM that would reach the United States. And it would take quite a few upgrades and several new core stages and upper stages to have something that would be able to reach the United States. They need to have something that is very high thrust to be able to get here. here. And they don't have anything for re-entry capability, so they don't even have something that could deliver a warhead. They're still decades out from being able to do that. This rocket specifically, and its counterpart in Iran, are specifically for space launches. And I find that really interesting. You know, there's all this fear about it, but at the same time, they are trying to accomplish space goals. So I find it really exciting, them being like in the Sputnik stage, both North Korea and Iran. I find them both really interesting.
Yeah,
Anyway.
there was a bunch of FUD that kind of went around with fear, uncertainty, and doubt that went around with it. Like, oh, they can send payloads and blah blah blah. But this really was a space rocket, not a missile. You know, when they analyzed it, they went, yeah, they really can't convert this to a missile. This is for space missions. And the satellite looked to be, it was in a sun-synchronous orbit. It looks to be exactly what they said it was. So kudos to them for actually being able to make it go.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, the National Reconnaissance Office had a launch on Wednesday, February 10th.
4, 3, 2, 1, and liftoff of the United Launch Alliance Delta IV
it's
rocket.
burning the whole thing. It's
burning.
on fire.
The first stage is on fire.
That always happens with the Delta IVs because the gaseous hydrogen that has been burning off from the liquid hydrogen just ignites underneath the launch pad into this giant fireball of doom, and then all of the foam on the vehicle just lights up and catches fire.
Delta IV don't care.
Delta IV don't care. Off it goes. Actually, the Delta IV Heavy launches out of Vandenberg even changed the startup sequence of the engines to try to burn off the excess. Yeah, Jared's just shaking his head. No, it seems to make no difference
Didn't work.
whatsoever. No, that hydrogen goes boom and catches fire. Like I said, that happened Wednesday, February 20th at 11:40 Coordinated Universal Time from Space Launch Complex 6, or SLIC 6, at Vandenberg Air Force Base. Interestingly enough, that is the same space launch complex that was originally well, not originally created, but was recreated for the space shuttle launches that were going to happen on the West Coast.
Yep.
And so if you ever see a shot of a space shuttle sitting with mountains in the background with some red service structure next to it, that is at Space Launch Complex 6, which is now the home for the Delta IV launches. As I said, this is for the National Reconnaissance Office. This was Launch 45, so NRO L-45. This was launched aboard a Delta IV Medium Plus in a 5.2 configuration. What that means for mere mortals is that was a 5-meter fairing and upper stage, so slightly larger than normal. It also had 2 strap-on solid rocket motors on the side, so there's 2 guys on either side. It was not a Delta IV Heavy configuration. It's only the second time that this configuration of a Delta IV has flown, and it's actually in a funky orbit. That's a technical term. It's flying southwest from Vandenberg into a retrograde orbit. That means it's actually flying against the against the orbit of the Earth. So normally when you launch, you actually use the rotation of the Earth to your advantage to get into orbit because you want that extra speed. This does the opposite. It actually goes against that. We don't actually know the rationale for this different type of orbit for this particular payload, but that is what these particular payloads do. And based on that and a few other factors, it's thought to be carrying a Topaz 4 series of radar imaging satellites for the NRO. Unknown for certain. NRO hasn't said, hey, yeah, we're doing a radar imaging satellite. It's just thought that, you know, based on that orbit, that kind of vehicle, you know, where it's going, what it's doing, looks to be about a Topaz 4. That was the 31st Delta IV launch since debuting in 2002. All right, Space Mike, talk to me a little bit about SpaceX.
So SpaceX has 2 rocket launches that have been given preliminary launch dates pending some reviews. The first of those is going to be the SES-9 communication satellite, which I believe we have a picture of. With this communication satellite, first of all, this Falcon 9 rocket has been scheduled for February 24th to be launching from Space Launch Complex 40, or SLIC 40, in Cape Canaveral on the other side, the East Coast. And with the SES-9 spacecraft, it was built by Boeing Satellite Systems, and it's designed to operate for about 15 years in geosynchronous orbit. And it has a 12.7 kilowatt payload and 57 high-power Ku-band transponders. And because the satellite is headed for geostationary orbit and to support mission modification, SpaceX is going to launch in such a way that they will reduce the time needed for SES-9 to reach its orbital slot in geosynchronous orbit, meaning that the first stage will not have enough fuel to attempt a landing back at Cape Canaveral. but it might have enough fuel to attempt a landing on their Pacific-based autonomous drone ship. So they're going to make preparations for that, but the main thing here is to make sure that this mission goes off successfully. And if all goes well with the SES-9 mission, then SpaceX is going to proceed with CRS-8, the 8th commercial mission to the International Space Station, which so far has received a very tentative launch date of about April 1st. Now, some problems with this particular mission have come up already. We can go ahead and cut the picture there. They've been doing static fire testing of the first stage core of the Falcon 9 that's going to be used for CRS-8. This is the first commercial cargo mission to the International Space Station since the accident back in July of 2015. And with this whole thing, there was apparently some sort of anomaly that came up during testing, and some of the engines might have even been damaged. And as of right now, we don't know what the extent of that damage was, but there is repair schedules that are for that. And as of right now, that tentative date of April 1st, that's the no earlier than April 1st date, is still kind of set. However, NASA hasn't been making too many official announcements about that date yet. However, some other cool things with this launch, if whatever problems they're having with the rocket, if they do come up with problems, SpaceX has integrated some new software into the Dragon capsule, so that in the case like they have an accident and the Dragon survives, like in CRS-7 where it survives a rapid unplanned disassembly, then it would be able to remove its nose cone and jettison its parachutes to be able to survive that. The Dragon capsule on the CRS-7 mission would have survived if it had been able to have that code to be able to do that. So if that's the case, then if they have another accident, they have that safety feature. And especially on this mission, it has a very special payload, and this is Bigelow Aerospace's BEAM module, or Bigelow Expandable Activity Module. And actually, that has been recently packed into the trunk of the CRS Dragon. You can see a picture of it right there from Bigelow Aerospace's Twitter page. And with this, if everything goes well, it's expected to perform for about 2 years at the International Space Station, and it's going to be providing a key shakeout of the technology that's likely to play a major role in future deep space exploration, going to Mars and all of that. So very cool updates, and I hope that both of those missions go off successfully. And we're just going to have to wait and see, especially for that April 1st date, if that gets moved around or pushed back at all. But as of right now, we hopefully are 11 days away from a SpaceX launch with the SES-9 communication satellite.
Yeah, the chat room is very excited for the next SpaceX launch. They're getting antsy. They want the next Falcon 9 to launch. NASA has created some gorgeous imagery that is absolutely incredible and right up our alley.
Yeah, I think these are the posters that we need next.
I agree.
Yes.
I agree. Yeah, we have some. What are the? Who do we have?
I knew you were gonna put me on the spot, and I don't know if.
Ron
Guyette.
Ron Guyette. Yeah, we have his posters, the Travel the Cosmos series, and they're amazing. But I think these are pretty cool.
These might be the next posters. If you ever come over, this is what you'll see. These were set. These were. Well, some of them, I can't say produced, but NASA's JPL, or Jet Propulsion Laboratory, put these on their website. That much I can say. And it's a poster set of 14. And did you have all of them on there?
Oh yeah, we have all 14.
Okay, awesome. The whole set is called Visions of the Future. Some people might recall last year there were 3 that were put out, and they were really neat. And this is kind of playing off of some of that. There was a Mike is getting really close to the camera, so you can see.
Sorry, guys.
No. It's funny. It's like I have this huge head right behind me. Sorry, I apologize. They're fashioned after the travel posters of like the 1930s. Each of them is steeped in a little bit of equal parts reality and some hopeful whimsy. So there's some, like this one you're looking at the moment, talks about the field of gravity of the super Earth. So this particular planet has, it's much bigger than our Earth, which is why we're calling it the super Earth, et cetera, et cetera. And so the gravity on it, much like you were talking earlier, would be even
I
more
think
felt.
their Jupiter poster is, I think, my favorite.
Yeah.
Well, you'll know it when you see it, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, some of these are just really amazing. And some of them were produced by a house out of Seattle, a creative house, and they just did some really amazing things. And they actually have some interesting backstories.
That's
on some,
a good one.
That's awesome.
Isn't that great?
Yeah. It's great because it really taps into a lot of the sort of fantasy we have about just travel in general, let alone space travel. You know what I mean? Like it really just I don't know, it hits an interesting spot, I think. And each poster also has a little bit of text explaining what humans might do when they get there.
Where's enchiladas?
That's funny.
Oh my gosh.
That's funny.
Oh my gosh.
These,
Ben,
of course,
please.
because they were put out by NASA, they are free to download from JPL's website, jpl.nasa.gov/visions-of-the-future. I'm sure if you just hit jpl.nasa.gov, you'll be able to find them, no problem. Their series, on series, they were talking about how it's the last stop before Jupiter to get water, so there's actually like a little water pump, much like you would have if you were traveling in the 1930s across America.
Awesome.
Mars is really cool. It's got the rover on it. It even has some plants insinuating that we've already been to Mars by then.
I think there's only one more.
Yeah.
That's a good one too.
The
I like
Grand
that one.
Tour.
We have that one up at the observatory.
175 years that all the planets sort of line up, and so you can take the grand tour and see all of them in one foul swoop.
It's the Grand Circle Tour.
That's right.
I suppose circle. Anyway, so they're really, really gorgeous. They're really amazing, and they're free to download. So go out there, download, print them out, hand them out to friends, put them up in your house. Really, really amazing.
And speaking of incredible imagery, you've got some other gorgeous images.
Yes, a very interesting study that was done by some of our scientific friends down in the southern hemisphere. Scientists have now looked through the Milky Way with the highest precision yet. So as you can imagine, we are inside of the Milky Way galaxy. So that's a bit of a problem because if you try to take images outside of the Milky Way galaxy, part of our galaxy is blocking our view, as we like to say.
Stupid galaxy.
Dumb galaxy.
Down in front.
Oh, it's like having a camera inside of your body and trying to take images of the outside. Obviously,
a terrible and gross analogy.
it is a very gross analogy, but it's the analogy that we go with. So we call that area where the Milky Way obscures the view too much the zone of avoidance. Because we obviously want to avoid looking in those areas because you can't see anything. But a study done by a group of people with very long names that I will read now. The Commonwealth Science and Industrial Research Organization, the International Center for Radio Astronomy Research, the University of Cape Town, and the University of Western Australia have looked through the zone of avoidance using several radio telescopes and have taken an incredible amount of data. Now let's take a look at this image here because this is based off of the actual data that they developed. So what you have there is that blue galaxy is the Milky Way. So that is our galaxy, sort of as scientifically accurate rendition as we can make of our own galaxy. And then in the background there, those red galaxies are the ones that we couldn't see in the zone of avoidance. Now, this may actually end up helping explain a mystery that we've had in astronomy that's been called the Great Attractor, which we noticed for the first time in the late 70s, which is that there's a point in space where that nothing appears to be there, but the Milky Way is moving towards it at about 2 million kilometers an hour. So that means that there's a mass roughly of about 1 million billion suns in this area. And it turns out that there are all these galaxies and galaxy clusters and superclusters in this area that we would expect to have found the Great Attractor at. So there you go. Mystery sort of solved.
Wow. Awesome. All right, Space Mike, talk to me about ViaSat.
So yeah, ViaSat has actually changed the schedule of when they're going to be launching one of their satellites, the ViaSat 2. They were planning on launching it on a Falcon Heavy at the end of this year, but instead they've actually switched over to an Ariane 5 rocket. And the reason for this change is because the Falcon Heavy has been delayed so many times. Its demo launch was supposed to take place in April of this year, and it's pushed back now to no earlier than September. So this is kind of a weird transition here. However, it doesn't necessarily mean that the relationship between ViaSat and SpaceX is deteriorating. With ViaSat, they have said that they still plan to keep a Falcon Heavy launch later on for their ViaSat 3 line of satellites, which will debut around 2020. And the company has also reserved another Falcon Heavy launch for a ViaSat 3 satellite, but hasn't signed a contract for that one yet. Apparently, their original contract that they had for this ViaSat 2, they're kind of reserving that for a future launch and possibly one more. But also interestingly, ViaSat and Eutelsat have recently entered a partnership that will coordinate efforts from both companies to expand the European broadband market. and it seems that they will also be joining forces to what seems to be a space race. And I guess that's the race to get global internet broadband coverage. So there's definitely going to be a lot more payloads in the future. So it's going to be interesting to see what that brings about. But in any case, the first launch of this ViaSat is going to take place in the first quarter of 2017 instead of sometime this year. So that's what's going on there.
That's scary, scary fast global satellite internet, right? I mean, it was measured in...
Prepare for 5G. It's coming.
Yeah, it was like terabits worth of bandwidth. I mean, it was... I don't remember if that was it. It was a lot, though. I don't remember what the number was, but it was a scary large amount.
Dang.
All right, Carrie Ann. Okay, go.
Okay, go.
Okay, go. Okay, go.
So we can't show the video
because
copyright.
It kills me. It kills me.
But it is amazing.
Awesome.
So there's a band called OK Go, and they do some really awesome videos. You may remember them from doing. They're like these, not just awesome videos. They are beautiful and intricate, as the way
the choreography is amazing.
Is amazing. They've done treadmill choreography dances. You may have remembered. They've done a Rube Goldberg optical illusion sort of video for Here It Goes Again and The Writings on the Wall, respectively. But this one, in particular, is done in 0G. It's so amazing. Okay, so I know it doesn't look really amazing because it's only a still shot, but you have to trust me on this one. So much like the famed Vomit Comet that astronauts have previously done some training in, this one is done with the Russian airline of S7. OK Go and crew spent about 3 weeks near the Russian Space Agency's Cosmonaut Training Center preparing for the shoot and the video. They've filmed it over about 21 parabolas, which is the plane going up and the plane coming down, which is what gives you that 0G sort of feeling. And that was 21 to do all of, like, the training, the rehearsing, the shooting, et cetera, et cetera. And when you're coming down, you only get about 30 seconds worth of weightlessness or so. Right. And their songs are like 3 minutes plus. So of the 21, 13 of them were used to get used to just the weightlessness and figuring out what they wanted to do and things like that. Also, the group wanted to know what looks cooler in zero gravity, like open toothpaste or like a can of soda. I love that notion, just in general. So they did 8 filmed takes. They filmed just continuously, and they did some really creative editing. Although in some parts they didn't always edit out the part where they were coming back up. There were some things where they actually used some of those segments and then sort of edited and stitched everything down.
I thought the editing was amazing because it really did feel like they were in almost always a 0G arc.
They weren't. I mean, you could kind of see, like, if you pay a lot of attention, you can see there are certain segments where they actually are still filming while they're going up, and then there's other
because all the balls go funk.
Right. Yeah. that sort of thing.
Pulling out.
Exactly. And the band has said that there were only about 58 quote unquote puke events out of the whole thing, which I thought was really good. Yeah. It's not just, so in case you haven't seen the video yet, it's the band and they're singing and they're kind of flying and what have you, and then there's also these flight attendants who clearly are some sort of aerial artists or something, because at some point these women are like doing some, not just somersaults in the air, but like full splits, like in a helicopter sort of thing. Yeah, it reminds me of like the 1920s swim sort of films, you know, right? Mm-hmm. We've got all the choreography. Really, really impressive, just visually stunning, and just a really amazing feat. And even if you don't like the song, just put it on mute and watch it because it's really interesting.
I like the song. I thought it was actually really well done.
I do too.
It's pretty good.
Aerial acrobats.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, our main topic this week, which is the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services turns 10, and what kind of impact has that made on commercial spaceflight or spaceflight in general? Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Look into her face, determination in her eyes. She won't give up or quit or fall for little fashion lies. Filled with awesome expectation, this girl's a fascination. Nothing in her way will keep her from her destination. 'Cause she's fire walking, she's fire walking. When it's hot, she keeps on moving. The heat keeps on improving. Yeah, she's fire walking, she's fire walking to be free.
And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get into our main topic this week, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who've helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed $5 or more to this specific episode. Every single penny helps. If you'd like to help crowdfund the shows of tomorrow, head on over to patreon.com/TMRO. And the hashtag for this week's show is COTS10, which is Commercial Orbital Transportation Services. And the 10 is because this is the 10-year anniversary
Yes.
of the COTS program. And that was kind of a radical idea back in the day, right? Because before the COTS program, it was basically governments that sent stuff to space. It was governments that sent stuff to the International Space Station. And maybe a private company would work under contract with NASA to help build something. But ultimately, it was NASA that was doing this stuff. It was Roscosmos that was doing this stuff. It was JAXA that was doing this stuff. It wasn't private companies. Enter the COTS program, which said, look, we want small players to come in, and we want them to put payload up to the International Space Station. We want them to build the spacecraft. We want them to build the rockets. We're not going to get in their way. We're going to give you stuff, and we want you to bring it there. You make it go.
Yeah.
And it's forever changed the market in many different ways. In what ways do you think it's, or has it not? Maybe that's an arrogant statement.
I feel like in the research and development aspect of it, essentially moving technology forward, I feel like it's really started to accelerate things in terms of making small sats an actual market. I think it kind of helped a little bit because you had the ability to find a launcher that would be within your cost range to allow you to do something like that. And also with reusability as well, it kind of allowed that to re-enter the design consciousness at that time and made it a priority and the reality that it is now.
So there was someone who brought it up. Lure in the chat room asks, without COTS, would there be a SpaceX? Mike?
I don't know. I mean, SpaceX was formed before COTS came around. I think that SpaceX would still exist, but it would probably be at a very different level. Like, they probably would not have achieved the amount of success and progress that they have. Before the COTS program happened, they were still in their Falcon 1 program and were trying to launch stuff for the Air Force and even market that commercially. So I think that they would still exist because this is something that he's wanted to do regardless, but it certainly has helped them to be able to reach this level of success that they have over the past 10 years.
What about a company like Orbital, right? I mean, Orbital was around before COTS. So
Yeah.
they'd still be around.
This is something that I think about that. I think with this whole COTS program, all of this was done under a fixed price contract. There was very specific milestones that all the companies had to meet. And there was Kistler Aerospace before Orbital Sciences took over that part of the COTS contract. And they weren't able to meet certain things, but that's a whole other story. But because of all these very specific goals and details, and NASA would award them incremental amounts of money when they reached those goals and tested and proved that they were able to accomplish that. And that was able to help them to move along with the next phases of development and so on and so forth. And that was given out to Kistler, SpaceX, and Orbital Sciences, and that's even going on now for the CRS-2 contract. And something that I find really interesting about that is the cost of development of new rockets and new vehicles, because Orbital Sciences, they developed a new rocket and a new vehicle, just like SpaceX did, to do this. And both were developed extremely cheaply compared to other companies that were contracted in the past to develop rockets, namely the Atlas and Delta series. So this has brought down the price a lot. For the price of what they've been able to accomplish under the COTS program is really unprecedented for the amount of money that's been spent on any NASA program. Name one.
Would it have happened without COTS, though? Like, let's just say that COTS, the Commercial Orbital Transportation Services program, never got off the ground. Would companies have been able to come by and still do these low-cost launches?
That's a chicken and egg syndrome sort of situation.
Yeah.
It's hard to differentiate between one and the other, and it's very much so along the lines of the cooperation that things like X Prize hold, right?
Sure.
So, you put out the prize and you say, hey, this is something that we would like to do, but sometimes there's already companies that were working on something like it or something similar, or even sometimes the exact same thing. And just because the prize became a thing, right? That somebody put up money or there was some sort of incentive, regardless of whether or not it was a prize, and then other people kind of submitted, and then they did their thing, and either won or lost or moved on to continue to do that, but they didn't. I think it's too difficult of an answer or question to answer. Does that?
That makes sense. You know, we had...
Because like you said, some of these companies were already sort of doing these things. And then there were other companies that were inspired to do something similar when they saw these other companies doing that thing. It's too cyclical, I think.
And what about a company like Sierra Nevada that lost the initial COTS contract, but they continued forward with the Dream Chaser?
Sure.
So, you know, where would that have been? Would they have ever designed Dream Chaser, though, without COTS, I guess? If there wasn't that initial thing?
You'd have to ask them, I guess, at that point, right?
Dear Sierra Nevada.
But there's things like there's Armadillo Aerospace that were trying to do not exactly this sort of thing, but you know, Armadillo have been doing some things, and they got involved with the Northrop Grumman Lunar Lander X Prize Challenge. I remembered, and right, but they won some money, they didn't win some other money, they continued on for a little while and then eventually decided, nope, this is not going to be a thing, right? So, but when you looked at the time that, like, what was that, 2008? And you were looking at who was on the market in that general area and who was doing what, Armadillo looked like a huge contender.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, now, I don't want to say nothingness, but to a certain extent,
It
nothing.
evaporated, basically.
Yeah. So it's hard to say whether or not these companies would have continued on to do those things or not if they would have gone the way of Armadillo, right?
Actually, there's a really good question from the chat room, which is, I think this is from Belsari. It says, where would the commercial Orbital Transportation Services and NASA be today if the money invested in the Space Launch System had offered instead for a super heavy lift rocket kind of through a COTS type program? So would NASA be better?
That's interesting, yeah.
Right? Would NASA be better off instead of trying to build their own rockets? Although they are required under law. That's not actually NASA's rocket. That's Congress's rocket.
Yeah.
So they're required to build the rocket. But let's just say they weren't required to do it and instead could spend all of that money on a COTS type program. Do you think that would be better for NASA or worse for NASA? Or do you think it would have actually happened? Would we have a super heavy lift rocket by now?
I personally think we would. I mean,
Yeah.
I think the whole thing with this is that there was a lot of mistrust and not a whole lot of confidence that this program would be successful. And that's why it was under a fixed price program. They were not going to do this as business as usual, where companies were encouraged to go, you know, have delays and all these different things to keep reaping in more money and getting more profit and keeping their constituents happy. And because of that, they were still able to accomplish the goals for this, you know, pittance of money that was allowed to them. It's only been in the past like 2 to 3 years that they've actually gotten close to the amount of money that they've actually needed for it. But they were working off of so little money for that, but that was still enough to keep things going.
But
And it all comes back to money.
But they had back-to-back failures as well.
Yeah, and I think that the COTS program is one of those that was willing to accept the failure. You know, we're going to go out and we're going to do something experimental that no space agency has really attempted to do before, and that we're willing to take a punch or two in order to make that. And it was really telling that you had 2 failures in a row, but NASA still said, we're still going with the way we're going to go because this program has been so successful that even with the failure, it needs to continue on.
Chris Radcliffe in the chat room brings up an interesting point, which is COTS to the moon or COTS to Mars would have been intriguing, but COTS to build a heavy lift rocket wouldn't have done so well. Probably the same problem that Space Launch System has today.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, wait a minute. Is lunar COTS not a thing anymore? Because NASA has a program called Lunar COTS, and that's for a whole bunch of different programs. I think even Maston is part of that with the whole. Oh my gosh, I just forgot the name, but with the Centaur stage that lands on the moon.
Is that Zeus?
Yeah, Zeus. Thank you, Zeus. I think that's part of the Lunar COTS program, and there's a whole thing for that. And it's really small compared to the commercial cargo program, but there is a program for that, as far as I know. I don't know if it's continued. It might have been canceled this year, but there is a Lunar COTS program. I do know that.
How small is really small, though? I mean, there's a point where it's just not. It's not
Like
real.
less than $50 million.
Well, that's not real.
Yeah.
Yay, you
Well,
have
I mean,
a program.
the initial COTS contracts, the initial milestones for the first couple of years was even less than that. For the first 2 years, it was less than 50 million. It took until like the 4th or 5th year until they broke that 100 million mark that was divided over both teams.
Yeah, and that's
In
probably.
all fairness, I guess I don't remember the milestones. I remember the program as a whole. Well, you fondly remember the program as a whole, but you don't remember the hard beginning days, right? So
Yeah.
That's funny, Ben, because you signed the petition.
Yeah.
I did.
Your name and picture is on the lunarcots.com website.
Wow. How about that?
That's
I'm
fantastic.
so glad we found it at the same time. I was like, oh my gosh, what just happened there?
Well, that's embarrassing.
To be fair, it says co-host of Space Vidcast, so you probably signed it a long time ago.
It must have been.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
That's so awesome.
Kind of amazing.
So back to the original question. How has it changed spaceflight?
Well, I mean, look at what we've got. We've got commercial companies actually doing things in spaceflight for commercial purposes, if you will. Like you actually have SpaceX, which is a commercial company launching commercial satellites now on a soon-to-be regular basis. And that was like something that we didn't really have over the past
But you've
decade
got like
or so.
one. You've got one star child out of that. I mean, Orbital was kind of pre-existing. They're fairly old space already.
They're adapting though. They're working as best as they can to try to adapt to new space strategies and things like that.
Sure, but right now they're launching on top of an Atlas V, and they're kind of using the old model of just go and outsource all the parts and put it together. I guess the only and maybe I'm mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong. Anyone in the internet, you'll leave a comment, let me know how I'm mistaken, or anyone here in the forum. It feels like the only real new part of new space that they're doing is the not cost plus. They're doing fixed price. Other than that, I don't see where the new is coming in.
Well, I feel like fixed price is one of the big things with COTS, like Space Mike was talking about earlier, because that gives you such a small window to work with that it really does give you the incentive to deliver for once on that, as opposed to keep the program going for decades on end simply because money. So
that's fair. That's fair.
And you look at Kistler Aerospace, who wasn't able to reach their milestones on time. They were given extension after extension after extension, couldn't meet it, so they got dropped.
Yeah.
And I think they even had to give some of their money back even. I'm not sure about that, but yeah. So, I mean, companies have, if they're on this program, they have that extra incentive as well. If we don't meet this, not only are we not going to get the money, we're going to get dropped from it entirely, and we might even have to reimburse NASA a little. So.
Yeah, you get held accountable in this program for your mistakes.
It's hard to see. We're having some chat room interesting things going on. So on my screen it says Zigger said this. On your screen it says Instructor 1701 said it. Someone in our chat room.
I know, it's hilarious. And then I'll mark it, like I'll star it, I'll bring it over here, and I'll have it like a third totally different name.
Yes.
It's awesome.
So somebody in our chat room pointed out, we had 30 years of space shuttle reusability, which was expensive and failed to produce the savings or frequency that 10 years of COTS has achieved, which I think is a really interesting point.
Yeah, that's bam. Ouch. Straight to it.
I'd love to know what you guys think. What do you guys think the commercial orbital transportation services? And let's kind of take that forward to that whole. It's not just COTS, because of the 10 year that this has kind of been going on. So let's extend it to all of that kind of new stuff. The CCI cap, the CCT cap, which is the commercial crew transportation.
Integrated capability.
Yeah, well, that's the I cap. The T cap was the. Okay.
Transportation integrated capability.
Yeah. Okay. So I know.
Nice.
Oh, NASA and your acronyms, you hurt my head. Basically, all the different programs for sending stuff to the International Space Station, be it crew or cargo, or all of this fixed price, this next generation of stuff under essentially the COTS program. So, what do you think of it? How has it changed spaceflight? Has it changed spaceflight? Maybe you don't agree with it. Maybe you think that we should have stayed with the older way of doing things, and that had we done the older way of doing things, maybe we'd be further along by now. Or vice versa. Maybe if we hadn't done as much of this older way of doing things, maybe we'd be further along by now with more of the new way of COTS of doing things. What do you think? Leave it in all of our different forums, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, wherever you'd like. And speaking of comments, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, comments from our last week's show. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Tomorrow. Now, before we get started with the comments from our last week's show, I did want to give a huge shout out to all of the patrons of Tomorrow who have helped to make this specific segment of this episode happen. These are the people who have contributed 1 penny or more to this specific episode. I had to look at the slate and go, that's not the one I'm expecting. You tried to fool me, Donna, but I caught on. These are people who've contributed 1 penny or more. That's right, as little as 1 penny gets your name in the show. Do you happen to have the other slate? Aha! And these are people who've contributed $2.50 or more to the show. These people will, in addition to getting your name in the show, will also get access to After Dark as soon as it's available on demand. And everyone, be it 1 penny or more, will get access to the Patreon shows, Patreon-only shows that we do at the last Sunday of every month. We're going to start doing that. All right, let's go ahead and get started with some comments from our last week's show. And the main topic for last week was, where should we explore in the where in the solar system should we explore next?
In the where solar system?
No, hang on, that's not fair because, hang on, the screen there says in the where solar system should we explore next, but it's where in the solar system.
Okay,
blah,
well,
blah,
yeah,
blah.
but you made
I
that
made that,
slate.
blah, blah, blah.
Okay,
But
and
this-
I copied and pasted this from last rundown, last
says-
week's rundown.
Oh, so I grabbed it from the YouTube page.
Oh, well then, you screwed yourself over.
I like I'm reading my notes, which don't match the screen. Let's see how the rest of the show goes. All right, let's get. I don't have a new one, so Capcom,
Commander Ariane.
Commander.
Oh, goodness, no.
Cece?
Oh, I'm sorry. I said it.
Too late. You're Commander now.
Wow, all right. So this one comes from U5KO off of YouTube. Goodness. Given the objective fact, the only sensible way to do dedicated exploration activity is via robotics, and given the relatively low cost of the same, the next thing we should explore is everywhere within our Delta V budget.
Robots are. That's my official answer is, and I quote.
Me too.
This is what it sounds like when you open a can of worms.
Yes.
No, robots are good. Robots do a lot of great things.
Yeah, they don't complain.
They don't require
they don't
oxygen
or food or water.
They also don't do a whole lot of science.
Yeah, there's
That's-
also that too.
that's the problem.
You're very limited in the adaptability of your robot to do science.
It has pretty much almost no adaptability, right? It's whatever you put on there is what you get. And if you hit a situation in which you need anything else, you're out of luck. And when you're exploring an alien world and you don't know what you want, that kind of makes it hard. Now, they do a really great job with all the rovers. That's not to say that any of the rovers or landers or satellites or spacecraft suck. They're all awesome. And they all do a fraction of the science that a single human could do, star. So, yeah, humans suck. They're expensive, they complain, they have to deal with their mental stability, they need water, lots of it, they need food, lots of it. They need sleep and attention.
They need
and they can
room,
do
too.
so much more science, it's not even funny, which makes it worth it. Also, it goes to our psyche. We want to explore. It's part of what we are as a species. That's what we do. Robots are neat, but they're not us. So, yes, we should continue robot exploration, but we should also continue human exploration, or at least push human exploration for Mars and Enceladus, Enchiladas, and
Between that and Pluto, I swear.
we should go to the planet Pluto. We should.
And the planet Ceres. But on the other side of that same coin, though, I think it's still a good idea to send robots first. Because, like for Mars, for example, if we'd have waited to do any science at Mars until we sent humans, we still wouldn't know anything more about Mars than we did 100, 200 years ago.
Yeah,
Plus, when we do finally go there, we'll have internet access. So, of course.
Very important.
Very
It's that
important.
human mental state thing that's important. Look, I completely agree. There's a lot of this either or, and that's not the correct answer. The correct answer is you need both, and you don't need, one shouldn't steal from the other. They should both be fully funded, in my humble opinion. Now I realize that I don't make the budgets, and it's not that easy, but you do need the robotic missions, but you do need the human missions.
Yeah.
And you get a lot of these scientists that are like gung-ho for robots because humans steal all their funds. Well, it sucks that the funds are stolen by human missions. That shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
But B, you should have those human missions. So, anyhow.
Yeah, I'm with you. And even when you do a human mission, especially to Mars, there might be a part of the terrain that you can't get to, so you can send a robot that you brought along with you to get there, potentially. So they'll work together when they're there as well.
You just blew my... Or we could become robotic cyborg... I don't know.
I'm all for that.
All right, moving along. Commander? Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, you're not. So this one also comes off of YouTube. The name I have no idea how to pronounce.
Etienne?
Etienne Vadam? Van
Sure.
Damme?
Van
Van
Damme?
Damme?
Van Damme.
Yeah.
Van Damme? Says the Chinese rockets use a different fuel, which is white as red, orange, and is harmful to man, right?
Well, it's harmful to pretty much biology.
Yeah.
Yes, that is correct. And it's not just the Chinese. So older Russian rockets did this as well. And actually, spacecraft use this. It's a hypergolic fuel. I believe the Chinese specifically use hydrazine. Hypergolics. Let's back up and explain that. Normally,
Not made out of hot chocolate.
Made out of hot chocolate, no. So a hypergolic fuel is something that will react with anything else and create combustion, essentially, right? So
As soon as the two chemicals touch each other.
as soon as they touch, and it's great in space, right? Because for a normal rocket reaction, you're going to need, let's just say, your fuel, your oxidizer, and then you need a third thing, which is your ignition source. You need to actually ignite those three things, or you don't get fire. If you just take rocket propellant 1 and combine it with liquid oxygen and don't ignite it, it's just going to make a giant mess.
Yeah.
Right? So, but a hypergolic fuel, if you take the two chemicals and have them come in contact with each other, it will create a reaction, an explosive reaction. Like that.
Yeah.
So hypergols are traditionally not super great for biological matter. Hydrazine, if you inhale hydrazine, it burns your lungs, doesn't it?
I've heard it smells like fish, but nobody's lived long enough to say
Yeah, if you
it.
smell fish, yeah. I believe it just it burns you from the inside out, essentially. So that's why whenever we see the Chinese launch, you see that kind of like orange-red cloud and people running towards it. We're all like, no, don't do that.
Yeah, or the photos of the rocket parts sitting in someone's house, and there's an orange-red cloud still coming up from it, and everybody's around it and like sitting on the parts like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, no, that's highly toxic rocket fuel.
Yeah.
And the space shuttle had hypergolics on it as well. And that's where after a space shuttle disaster, they would say, don't go near any of the shuttle parts. It wasn't a conspiracy. There was very toxic fuel on the space shuttle that they used to orbit around in space. So yes, and actually some of the Russian rockets still use hypergolics. On their upper stages, don't they? Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Certain upper stages, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, a lot of rockets still use hypergols. They're nice because they just kind of work.
Yeah.
Right? You don't need that ignition source. So when you don't need to force that ignition source, it's kind of a guaranteed big bada boom. So all right, moving right along. Commander?
Yeah, thank you. It comes off of Facebook from Daniel Goof. I personally think that we should have large stations at the L1 and L2 Earth-Moon Lagrange points to act as a support network for lunar and Martian research posts and colonization efforts.
So L1 and L2 indicating two different Lagrange points between Earth, Moon, and Moon outside of Moon. Kind of different points that are essentially held in place with gravity. So you can kind of sit there for free, essentially, right? The gravity's pulling on it.
Neutral gravity points?
Neutral gravity points, right? Gravity's pulling on it in such a way that you can just kind of sit there and not expend any or very, very little fuel to kind of maintain that spot. And this is, again, in reference to last week's topic of where we should explore next. And that would be a good, because using the Lagrange points is kind of a catapult, a launching platform to the rest of the universe is a great idea. Once you escape Earth's gravity well, you're in a great place to go pretty much anywhere you want. So using L1 or L2, Lagrange 1, Lagrange 2, would be a great place to kind of start. It's not really exploring, though, right? I'm not sure that actually is... It's
Yeah, but stepping stones, right?
I guess. I mean, that would open up exploration. Go ahead, Mike.
Something interesting is that, according to Charlie Bolden, that actually is part of the plan. At the last International Astronomical Union held in Jerusalem last year, all the different heads of the different space agencies were talking about going to the moon. Europe wants to go to the moon, Russia wants to go to the moon, China wants to go to the moon, and they want to work together. And Charlie Bolden was there saying, well, we do have this plan of having Lagrange points either in L1 or L2, for our asteroid retrieval missions and eventually for Mars missions as well. And we are more than happy to support all of your guys' activities on the surface of the moon, and we can do everything that we can to help you guys out in that regard. But we probably won't be going to the surface with you guys, at least not initially. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And if you dig deeper into a lot of the different ideas for Space Launch System payloads, you can see a lot of these kind of deep space habitats that they would test out in a type of L1 or L2 station like that would eventually be used for habitats for Martian journeys with the astronauts on board. So that is part of the plan.
Chris Radcliffe brought up a great point, which is Lagrange points are where your base camps are, and you explore from them. So, yeah, no, I don't disagree. I mean, I think this is a great idea. I just, that's not where you're exploring. It's kind of the stepping stone for, like, that's like your first step, like, we're about to explore, but that's not where you actually explore. And then Citizen 92239 says it's not exploring, it's colonizing. Even better, right?
Yes.
To a point, yeah. I mean, if we can start colonizing space, that is, in a way, even better.
You can do a lot of solar research as well in areas like that, because you can get out of the Earth's magnetosphere, that magnetic field that the Earth generates around itself in orbit around the moon. And you could do a lot of helpful stuff to understanding how the human physiology would react to having no radiation shielding, basically.
Poorly. So. I can answer that right now with no experiments required whatsoever. The answer is poorly.
Well, and again, stepping stones. Exploring
yes.
leads to colonizing.
Sure.
So
yes.
it's.
There you go. All right, next up, Commander.
This one comes from... Oh.
Democracy?
Demosian?
Demosian. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Off of Reddit. I actually had lost my place for a half second. I think it would be worth looking into sending a floating mission to Venus. It would come in two parts, an orbiter and a lander/floater. Not really a lander since it floats. And it would float high in the Venusian atmosphere and sample the air, then beam the data up to the orbiter.
Or as I say incorrectly every time, Venetian.
No, Venetian are from Venice.
Venusian?
Venusian.
Venusian. Yeah.
Venusian? Venusian.
Venetian.
That's about as wrong as it can get.
Yeah, that would actually be very cool. And actually, one of those posters, do you have the floating skies?
Venus poster?
The floating skies in Venus?
That's
close. That's close. Yeah. The problem is they're labeled poster 1 through 14, so he's gonna have to
fish through them.
Well, I guess while he's doing that, NASA has done studies on looking at atmospheric balloons in Venus, and even using those balloons to modify their pressure so that they could go down to different altitudes. So they have an idea of like a balloon with thermal protection on it that would allow it to maybe dip really deep into the atmosphere to maybe a kilometer or even half a kilometer of the surface, and then very quickly ascend back up to an area where it would be a lot safer for it to be at. So,
all right, he doesn't have it, so that's all right. You can go back earlier in the show and find it that way.
That would be a cool mission.
Yeah, it would be beautiful.
Yeah.
All right, and finally, Commander.
Off of Twitter comes Novateco. It says, space race not about the moon? Revisionist history. Many of Russians' first were derivative. Example, first to spacewalk with red socks.
I don't think that was entirely our point. We weren't saying that the moon landing was irrelevant. We're saying that up until the moon landing, basically the United States was losing the space race, and that Russia did a good chunk of the firsts. And a lot of those firsts were very impressive. You look at Yuri Gagarin's flight. He orbited the Earth. It took us a while to get that down.
Yep.
So, they did quite a few firsts. First man in space, first woman in space. They figured out food in space before we did. Like, a lot of these core things they figured out before us, and we just said, look, we can't beat them in a lot of these firsts. We're just going to laser focus on the moon and figure that out, and that's what we did. But that shouldn't downplay anything that Russia did, because what they pulled off was amazing, and it was, there you go.
Yeah. Fantastic.
There's that. All right, that's our show for this week. Like I said, please use the hashtag COTS10 and referencing this on social media. Make it a little bit easier for us to find it, and it's going to be some really cool things that we'll be working on in the future as well. So each show will get its own hashtag. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys like it. Always welcome your feedback on any changes to the show that we've been doing. Leave those on any of the social media outlets that you'd like. After Dark is up next. Speaking of, I would actually like to rename After Dark. Possibly with season 10. So think about interesting names for that show. The show will be the same. I just think that name doesn't apply anymore.
It's not dark
It's
anymore
not dark.
when we do.
I mean, it worked. It doesn't. Think of new names. I think that would be fun. Leave that somewhere. That'd be great. I'd really much really appreciate it. And we'll see you guys next week.
Spice.